When we had our first ethnic service in the village church, the pastor requested that people play ethnic instruments. But at each ethnic service, the only instrument used was the keyboard, just like every other Sunday. When interviewing the congregation, I learned that even though there are people who can play instruments like the ukulele and bamboo flute, people don't feel confident to play any of these instruments in church. A great way to address this issue would be for young people to learn to play ethnic music instruments. This would also give young people better things to do besides playing with screens and staying out late, often drinking. Then I met Anes, a music teacher at a theological school in Ambon, on Facebook when he posted a video of a children's bamboo flute ensemble he had formed in a village church elsewhere on Seram. I contacted him and arranged to visit him with our village pastor, 2 elders, and several people involved in music ministry at the village church. At the annual church planning meeting, it was decided to invite Anes to hold a workshop for kids in the village the second week of July. But that was right in the middle of rainy season, and the day before we were to leave, it rained a lot. The next morning was more of the same, but when the rain let up a little bit, we loaded up the car and headed out. When it rains like that, there is sure to be flooding along parts of the road. There are also 3 bridges being worked on that can be hard to cross when it rains. We were thankful to get past the first bridge in Suli, which is muddy when it rains and dusty when it doesn't. The rain let up while we were waiting for the ferry to cross over to Seram. And there was less rain in Seram. We got past the bridge they're working on in Rumakai without any problem. And then we got over the Tala Bridge. The road would be much better from there. That just left getting through the river into Rohua Baru. It started raining hard when we got there, and we feared the worst after all the rain the last 2 to 3 days. But we were happy to find the river not too difficult to cross. Bagaimana?
Oma, nanti Oma tunggu di rumah saja.
Kenapa?
Om Dion tadi ada kasih pengumuman, ada pertemuan.
Pertemuan apa?
Ini soal vaksin COVID katanya.
Oh, mungkin surat yang tadi malam dari rumah sakit di Masohi.
Kayaknya itu. Lalu polisi juga sudah ada sini.
Astaga naga.
Jadi Oma perlu tunggu sini.
Beta tunggu di dalam rumah.
Iya, tunggu.
Supaya jangan polisi lihat beta.
Beta pergi dulu.
About an hour later, Huna came home and said it looked like they'd let us have the workshop. It helped that she was able to take our vaccination cards. We just hoped that Anes and the 2 students he was bringing were also vaccinated. The next afternoon, I just happened to look at Facebook right when the mayor in Ambon was making an announcement about new COVID restrictions. Huna had gone to buy food for the workshop, so I phoned her to let her know. Hi, Huna. The mayor just announced that to enter Ambon, people need a proof of being vaccinated and a negative rapid antigen test starting on Thursday. Maybe we should go back to Ambon on Wednesday before the closing. After talking to Huna, I went for a walk and discovered 2 men teaching the kids who would be attending the workshop to read music and how to make a sound with a flute. Perhaps everything was going to work out after all. But then Anes called about the time I thought he was due to arrive. But he told me the workshop wasn't starting until Wednesday, so he was coming the next day. I later found out he and the pastor had spoken and delayed the workshop by a day, but hadn't told me. That meant going back to Ambon before the travel restrictions wasn't really an option. The next afternoon, the 2 men were again working with the kids who were going to participate in the workshop. When Anes arrived that evening, we were relieved to learn that they had all been vaccinated just a few days ago in preparation for the workshop. The other 2 were due to arrive early the next morning. Anis's students did not arrive early the next morning, but the pastor opened the workshop. Then Anis distributed flutes, talked about posture, and worked with the kids to produce a sound from their flutes. One of the highlights of the workshop was Regina. She was too young to be selected, but had a flute made from a section of hose. Later that morning, Anis's 2 students arrived, and Art did most of the teaching. They began by learning to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. During that time, Regina was able to get invited to join the workshop with her hose, playing along with her older sister. While Anis's students worked with the kids, Anis taught several of the men how to make and tune flutes. After Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, Art taught the kids to play one of the songs in the denomination's hymn book. Art demonstrated how to play from the heart. The next morning, Huna and I wondered whether or not we should go and get rapid antigen tests so we'd be able to get into Ambon. But we ended up deciding just to leave a little later in the day and hope that the post where they might be checking paperwork would already be closed. The next day, Art also taught the kids drills, since they were still learning to read music and which holes to cover for notes, and some of the kids were still struggling to produce sound. During the workshop, I gave the church several ukuleles to further diversify the musical instruments they use. During the closing ceremony, Anis encouraged the kids to keep practicing. The 3 teachers were given Naulu red cloth on their heads, and Regina was selected to hold the tray containing the cloth. One highlight of the closing ceremony was her father's attendance. He doesn't attend church functions very often. Certificates were given to each of the kids and each of the men who had learned to make flutes. The closing ceremony ended with the kids playing the hymn they learned during the workshop. As we left the village the next day, we saw that one of the men who had learned to make flutes had given one of his to Regina. The weather was fine, and we were able to get past all the potential trouble spots and bridges, including El Paputi, where we feared there may be a post checking paperwork as we entered the West Seram Regency, but there wasn't. We did pass 3 ambulances along the way, which was a bit ominous, since we've never seen any on that road before. We had feared that there may be a post checking paperwork at the harbor, as there had been earlier in the pandemic, but we were relieved to see that there wasn't. That just left a post on the border between Central Maluku and Ambon City. We got there around 3:30 in the afternoon, which we hoped would mean they had packed up for the day. When we rounded the last curve approaching the post, fearing the worst, we saw that there indeed was a post set up again. But nobody was stopping cars or motorcycles, and we drove right through. We had made the right decision not to try and figure out where we could get tested in Alpacera.